Hey, my name's Steve Sims, and I make shit happen. You want to find out more about me? Then catch me on this week's Jesse T Show.
Steve, welcome to the Jesse T Show, brother.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, man, I've been looking forward to this one, knowing what you're all about, knowing a little bit about your ethos and what makes you you. For the few people that haven't heard who you are, please share with us. Who are you and what do you do?
Oh, wow. Who am I? Well, I'm a father of three, biker, and drinks too much whiskey. What do? I get to mingle around with billionaires and people that own things like countries. For 20 plus years, I was the founder of the world's first and largest experiential concierge firm. And now I teach, train, and coach people how to go for stupid.
I friggin' love it. I love it. And where did this knack for going for stupid come from?
Ignorance. As a lad growing up in the 80s and the 90s, I didn't have the privilege of Instagram to tell me how inadequate my life was. So I just went out to try different things. And I realized that I didn't like being poor because I had no money. And I would look at people in new cars and being able to eat in fine restaurants. And I was like, why can't I do that? So I went on a journey to try and find out what these people did, thought, looked at, viewed each other, how they handled it. I wanted to find out because I was convinced it was a mindset. Because, hey, I'm from East London. I can hustle better than the next person. So what did these people have that I didn't? And I felt it was mindset. So I went out to try and find out what it was, created this concierge firm quite simply to act as a Trojan horse. I would bring you something you wanted, but basically I was slipping into the conversation. That was the whole point. I wanted to give you a reason to allow me to be in the room to ask you questions like, so how did you start this company? And why is that a problem? And why is that not? And how do you view wealth? And how do you view success? So I literally invented a company as a Trojan horse to allow me to have conversations with quite simply the most powerful people in the world.
It's the law of reciprocity, brother. You do for someone, they do for you, kind of thing. And it could be karma. You know, you just do enough nice shit in the world, enough cool stuff in the world, that stuff's going to happen for you. And you know, a little bit of synergy. You know, I grew up in Boston, poor as well, but I had that hustle. I had that ask a ton of questions, get in the room and do whatever it took to kind of get there. And so where was that instilled in you? Was it just a method of survival where you're like, shit, this is what I got to do? Or did you have someone in front of you as a kid that kind of led the way for those types of behaviors?
Oh, God, no. I certainly had no one around me. In fact, probably the fact that I had the lack of people around me made me yearn for something. You know, if you're in a dark room, you yearn for sunshine kind of thing. Yep. I would be in rooms where everyone would be settling about how poor they are or, you know, the money they've got or how many beers they can have or the job they've got. They would moan about it, but do nothing about it. And the funny thing about entrepreneurs is I reckon, and I beg someone not to try this, but if you've got 10 entrepreneurs lined up next to each other, we're all vastly different, but there's always a gene that connects us. Yeah. And I reckon if you sliced us all in half, there's like a purple blood cell that runs through our veins or something. Because you can go to any decent entrepreneurial event and you will meet people of all ages, all demographics, all financial changes, but we can all sit at a table and connect. Yes. Because there's something about entrepreneurs that we're aggravated and we're pissed off until we solve it. So I think as I grew up, and of course, like I'm 250 pound of ugly fella. So me being aggravated and riding around on a motorcycle from East London was not a great cocktail for success. But my aggravation wasn't there to hurt someone. My aggravation was at how everyone else is happy to settle. And that made no sense to me. You know, why are you happy to, I can only have a couple of beers tonight? Well, why? Well, I haven't got the money. Well, okay, there's a reason. What can you do about that reason to make sure that it's no longer a reason? You know, but they didn't. And they would moan about that job and you'd go, well, why don't you quit? Nah. And the worst statement in the planet. Oh, better the devil you know. That's bullshit. And as entrepreneurs, we jump out of the frying pan into the volcano. Yes. We just go. Now, as far as I'm concerned, as an entrepreneur, fear propels us, because there's nothing more scary than not taking that chance, not making that phone call, not trying. And any entrepreneur knows you get broke, sued, ripped off, laughed at, ridiculed. And if you haven't had those things, hey, you're not an entrepreneur yet. But as an entrepreneur, we get those almost on a weekly basis. And I'm going to name drop. I worked with Elon Musk for a while, and I remember one of the statements he made. He said, look, they'll always laugh at you just before they applaud.
Yep.
Boom. Mic drop.
And there you go. So it's almost like a realization that you're on the right path, where there people are, the naysayers, they keep coming, they keep talking shit. And eventually you just get further down the field. And one day those naysayers become your fans, and you look back and you're like, told you so. Right. And
it's weird. It's weird, but it is, you're so right. I remember because again, for about 25 plus years, I only worked with billionaires, and now I work with entrepreneurs to help them become billionaires. But for all of that time, very, very few people knew who I was. I could be in a room, and I've been in rooms where the guys owned the city that we're in. And people have literally come up to me thinking I'm security, and they've handed me their car keys to go and get that car. And I'm the guy that is working for the big guy, and so it's very fun. And I was always happy being the unknown guy. In fact, I egotistically used to say I was the most connected guy on the planet that nobody knew.
Right.
And I was very happy with that. When my book came out, it kind of changed it. And all of a sudden I got haters, and I got naysayers, and I got jeerers. I got people publicly sending me emails and letters going, how can you sleep at night? You do all of these things for all of these rich, powerful people. How do you feel? I feel fine, thank you very much. But I realized that getting those jeerers and those haters and those laughs mean that you must be doing the same way.
Yep.
To be getting that hatred aimed at you, all right, something must be clicking. Thank you very much for that confirmation.
The show is all about the entrepreneurial journey from everyone's lens that comes on has a different kind of story. And mine is a little unique, where I grew up out of necessity. I would buy and sell and trade comic books, baseball cards. I would shovel snow for money. Sometimes I would get a cup of hot chocolate instead of actually money. I would go over to Logan Airport in Boston, and they had these smart carts that you would return to the stall, and a quarter would pop out. And we did this enough times as kids, but the best part about it was the thrill of the action, because we had security chasing us through the terminals the whole entire time. So it was like a hide and go seek kind of deal. And so I think some people are born with an entrepreneurial hustle, and then some people kind of acquire it or embolden it through the years. And I actually went down the wrong path for a while. I did and sold drugs for a couple of years, many years ago. So like I used my powers for evil. But I was since reformed. So what was your path like getting into Bluefish? And were you young, and were you a hustler? You mentioned this earlier. Like, what did that look like for you?
How old are you?
Me, I'm 38.
So you'll remember this period. I remember being at school, and I don't know what happened. I got into trouble in my class, and I was sent to see the headmaster. And it had obviously been something that I'd done stupid or wrong, because I was getting the cane. Yep. And this was back in the days where they would give you a cane across the front of your hand, not the back, the palm of your hand, and it would sting like shit. Right? Now you're not even allowed to point at a child.
No.
Because oh my God, you can't intimidate them. God no. But that was in a time when we used to get a cane across our hand. And I didn't want to go, and getting a cane across the hand bloody hurt and would make me cry. And I was in the headmaster's office, and sadly I had been there a few times before, because like all entrepreneurs, we need to be engaged. And if we're not engaged, we're very distracted. And so I was constantly distracted, distracting others, getting into trouble.
Yep.
And so I got into the headmaster's office, and the headmaster, I think he may have seen me a few times in the last couple of weeks. And he got the cane out, and he's like, you know the act, Steve, get your hand out. So I put my hand out. And of course, I didn't want it, and it was scary. And I'm not trying to say I was all tough and I stood up to it. No. I didn't want to be there. I knew this was going to hurt. And he hit me with a cane, and it hurt. Before he hit me for the second of the 3 lashes, he went, you're not going to end up as anything, Sims. Fine, fair enough. All your headmasters and your teachers say that. But it was the next line that caught me. He said, you're nothing but a hustler. I couldn't feel the second and the third lash. Something flicked to me, and I was like, why is that a bad thing?
Yep.
Now, if someone walks into your place of business today and goes, hey, you're looking for someone to work in your company, you're not going to find a better hustler than me. You're employing them purely on that. But we came from a time period, the pair of us, when being a hustler and an entrepreneur meant you couldn't keep a job. You didn't have a steady job. You must be dealing something shady.
Yeah.
Now
and sometimes we did.
And we did. Of course, I've always been on two wheels. I don't own a car. I've got a pretty little collection of motorcycles, but I'm two-wheel forever. In that kind of world, you can very easily take the wrong turn and end up in a crowd that are doing some stuff that could have led me astray. I was very, very lucky that I had friends that a few times when I would go, hey, get me involved, and they're still very, very, very dear friends of mine, they would turn around and go, Steve, play, hang out. We're going to have great times, but this world ain't for you. There's something.
Beautiful.
And here's the dumb thing. I got a friend of mine, I'm going to give him a shout out. Colin was the best man at my wedding. Massive, massive fella. And I'm not a small guy. He's freaking much bigger than me. He's like Hagrid, Okay. He'll probably appreciate that. He's a big beard. He's like Hagrid. And a typical biker, what you think would look like. And I remember he recognized something in me, I think, before I did. Because the conversations we had would deter me from going down one line and send me in the other. So I had good people then that maybe didn't know what could happen. I'm a bricklayer from England, riding around on a motorcycle. No one knew that in 20 years I was going to be working with Elon Musk, Richard Branson, and Sir Elton John. But they knew that there was something in me that I had to go and try. And it was really good that I had a couple of people on my side that actually wouldn't let me enter in that world. And the funny thing is, I don't want to detract too much, but I go to prison 3 times a year. And this started 3 years ago.
Yep.
And I got a friend of mine, Jason Gaynard, said to me one day, he said, hey, there's this group called Defy Ventures, and they go into prisons and they converse and chat with inmates that one day will be getting out, and we're trying to see how we can twist our hustle into legal, productive businesses.
Yes.
And I remember when he offered me that chance, and I've got a pretty, should we say, manly image. And I thought, yeah, I'm going to go to prison. That's going to be great for my Instagram postings. And I remember posting, if you can't get hold of me tomorrow, I'm going to prison. Now, it was meant as a little joke, but the amount of people that went, Steve, I've got your back if your wife needs anything. And I'm like, people had no doubt or no concern or no surprise that I was going to prison.
Wow.
But I went to prison for the wrong reasons.
Yep.
I went because it would make me look cool.
Yep.
I would be hanging around with lifers and people like this. That lasted about an hour. And when I got inside and I met people, I realized that a lot of these people didn't have the choice. They didn't have a Colin to just go, hey, maybe you shouldn't come to the house tonight. There's some people here. Stay away. Come back tomorrow night. They didn't have people like I did. Okay. They didn't have the gene to send. They didn't have the choice. When you're an 8-year-old being told to drop off this parcel at Uncle Philly, down the road, you don't know what the hell's in it. And by the time you're 12, you're nothing more than a trafficker.
Yep.
So they didn't have these choices, yet they had the hustle. And when I went in there, for a start, I felt hugely guilty that I'd gone in under the wrong reasons. I'd met so many people that did things that they really didn't have a choice. Yet in that darkest place, and I'm not talking about a little kind of country jail, I went to Kern. And I've been going to Kern for 3 years. It's a level 4 maximum security prison.
Wow.
You're in there not because you got a speeding ticket.
Right.
But these people have got, all right, I've made some decisions. Okay. And I love the way I've made some decisions that have got me here. Now they can call them mistakes, but by calling it a decision, you own it. Yep. I've made some decisions that have got me here. Now I'm going to make decisions that get me out. And in their darkest places, in a scary concrete jungle, they are allowing themselves to look ahead. And look, some of these people aren't getting out for 10 years. And that actually just shocked me. So I've been going for 3 years. And if anyone wants to come to prison with me, I go 3 times a year. Look me up on stevedsims.com. Follow me on Instagram. I'll let you know when the next time I go. But if you ever want to be comfortable in an uncomfortable situation, then let me get you uncomfortable first by putting you here and showing you what you're capable of.
Next time I'm across the pond, I'm going to go with you, brother, for sure. That's a great life experience for sure. That's an amazing tale of where ego met humility for you personally, right? Like you were excited, you were going to go out and have all this great stuff to talk about and showcase for the world to see. And then you get in there and a big old serving of humble pie, and you realized the gratitude that these people that were basically at the end of the rope, they had for what they had, and it was able to give you perspective, it sounds like. And so, where I've seen this recently, I had the pleasure of interviewing Roy Jones Jr. recently before his fight with Mike Tyson, and his head trainer, WAP, he goes by WAP. His name is Valerie Cooper, became one of my soul brothers right away. He was wrong. Well, he basically had like a petty theft when he was 17 that caused him to stay in jail for 35 years. He got in the system, murdered a guy and a half in prison because he needed to survive. The other guy survived after the attempted murder. But the moral of his story was, he's since reformed, changed his life, become a great guy. The moral of his story was the perspective and gratitude and humility he had, even though he spent 35 years of his adult life in prison. And then when he came out, the eyes that he had for the world and the love that he had for people, he's one of the most inspiring people I ever met. And it sounds like you got a dose of that just by at least seeing it from the outside looking in. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's 100% accurate. And I think the biggest mistake now would be for me to discard it. And so I hold it. And let's be selfish, okay? Let's be completely selfish. If I ever have concern that my life isn't absolutely phenomenal, all I've got to think about is the places that I go. And so every time I go there, not only do I meet good people that have made bad decisions, but I also go home going, I'm the wealthiest motherfucker in the planet. I am so wealthy. And when I can wake up in the following morning, have a cup of coffee sitting on my patio, you can't, I got more wealth than Bezos. I am there. So it gives me a great deal of perspective.
You know what, brother? It's so beautiful because all we have right now, the gift of time. And, I've held death in my hands twice in my life with my daughter and with my mother. And I've seen death, through military and different things and just growing up in the town I grew up in. And it's given me this beautiful perspective of how grateful I am just to have another second. And what do I do with that second? There's a Stoic philosophy called memento mori. And it just says, know that you're mortal, know that you're going to die, but let that be all the motivation you need to live a life well lived. And no matter where we get that motivation, whether it's going to this prison and seeing these people that are trying to come back and reinstitute themselves into society, or whether it's, just you're doing your own kind of work and your perspective of gratefulness and gratitude and humility, that's a life well lived. And like you said, rich people have money, wealthy people have time and happiness. That's the biggest difference.
I am thrilled and I don't know you, but I think that is the smartest thing I've ever heard. And I've always said, there is a huge difference between rich and wealthy, and you've just laid it out very articulately. So well done.
Yeah, brother. Our stories have kind of paralleled in a way, because I know that you were at one point looking to become a stockbroker, and you could tell a little bit about that story of how you Trojan horsed your way around that. But I actually, my outside of this podcast, my profession is a wealth manager. So I actually live in that world a little bit, which is crazy for a poor kid from Boston, from a poor kid to this wealth manager, right? And it's like this perspective that you have to have of just showing up. And like you have this thing where I've read in some of your bio, it says you don't take no for an answer, right? And so how did you change? First of all, tell us a little bit about that story, how you went from wanting to be a stockbroker to basically becoming, either the bank or people becoming bankers around you to fund all these adventures. How did that happen? And where did you learn how to take no for an answer, or not take no for an answer, I should say?
So let's answer the last question first.
Yep.
I think this is the East End market boy in me, the hustler. And the Barrow boy can sell sand to anyone in the Middle East. So they're very well known, and being Irish as well, we have the gift of the gab.
I believe it.
I don't want to take the liability of getting an answer that I'm not ready for. Now, I can reduce that liability by not allowing you any option of giving me an answer that I don't want. So if I want to have dinner with you tomorrow night and I say to you, yeah, Jesse, we got to have dinner tomorrow night, yes or no? I'm giving you a 50-50 chance of me getting the answer I don't want.
Yep.
But if I turn around and go, Jesse, I'm in your area tomorrow, dinner, do you want 8:30 or 9:30, Jesse?
So
I'm now positioning a question where either answer I'm still happy with. Okay. So I learned very early on to always ask a question that doesn't give you any liability of the answer. That was the first thing. Okay. So I don't take no for an answer. I don't ask a question where no can be the answer.
Beautiful.
All right. So that's the first thing. The second thing was I was in a pub once and we'd rolled up on the bikes and we'd pulled into this pub. And I walked in with my two boys, and in the pub, holding court, was the local Richard Branson, shall we say. You know, this guy in my little area of the woods, he owned a grocery store and a gas station. And in my little area of London, that made him the Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Richard Branson of your neighbor.
Yep.
He always had the nice car. He always had the hot girl from the village. You know, he was, and I'd heard about him, but I'd never seen him. And lo and behold, he's in this pub. Now I walked in. I was with my two guys, and my guys turned and went, "That's him." And I went, "Who?" And he's like, I can't remember the guy's name. He's like, "That's so-and-so." And I was like, "That's him?" And he's like, "Yeah, it is." And I went, "Oh." And before I realized it, crash helmet still in hand, because I'd got off the bike, I walked on and went, "Hey, how you doing? I'm Steve Sims." And the guy was like, "Oh, hello." And I went, "Oh, nice to see you gracing us in this pub." And I just started talking to him. And he went, "Oh, I was just getting a beer. Do you want a beer?" I was like, "Yeah." And I'm thinking to myself, I only had enough change in my pockets for 2 beers. It was the kind of days that you would go out, you'd buy the beers you had, and then you'd all throw the change you had in the table to see how many more beers you could get and just eke them out between the glasses. And I thought to myself, I've only been talking to the guy for 2 minutes and I'm up 1 beer. Result. That's major success. And I was so excited that I had just got a free beer that I turned around to my mates and they weren't there. And I had to turn around to see that they were now beer in hand, leaning up against the back of the pub, couldn't be further away from me. And I noticed at that moment, I had run to the opportunity and it had repelled them.
Yep.
Sadly, I never looked at my friends the same ever again. I suddenly noticed that, and there's a saying that Joe Polish taught me years ago. He said, the definition of hell would be for you to meet the man or woman you could have been.
Yes.
And I remember at that moment, I run to that opportunity. Now, the guy could have told me to piss off, you know? What would I have lost? Nothing. So as that kind of started off in my life, I realized that I was a broke-ass biker. I didn't like being broke. Loved being a biker, but didn't like being broke. So who's not broke? And in the 80s, who was the gods we revered? Stockbrokers.
Gordon Gekko, all those guys.
Absolutely. You know, briefcase with a phone on the top.
Oh, yeah.
So I went for a job because a friend of mine that I'd actually saved from a beating at school, he was now working in a bank and he was telling me how they were recruiting apprentices and experienced brokers to go to Hong Kong. And I'm like, I'm taking every chance I get, because if I don't take a chance, I'm still here. I don't. It's not like snakes and ladders where if you lose, you go back 10 paces. If you don't take a shot, you're still in the exact same position.
That's right.
Okay. So I went for this job and they needed a resume. So I didn't have a resume and I had to literally handwrite the resume because I didn't have a typewriter. So I handwrote this resume. And I'm not kidding you. In the resume, it confirmed how I was actually a descendant of the current royal family. I made this resume, and I was also, I think, like 21, something like that. So, because I was born in 1966, and I thought to myself, well, that's too young to be an experienced stockbroker. So I moved it to 1946. Okay. I made this resume greater work of fiction than a Harry Potter novel.
Right.
But I did it in a way that it was so obviously funny and outrageous that I was gambling on them going, right, okay, so you're actually looking at me going, so you're actually 41 and you're not 20. And the Queen is your mum.
Yeah.
You know, I just made it so silly that they would give me a chance. Okay. They never even read it. They recruited 60 people. Somehow I got recruited. They sent us over to Hong Kong. I landed on the Saturday. I got drunk with them on the Saturday night. Very qualified to do that. Got drunk on the Sunday night with them. Went to orientation on the Monday. And on the Tuesday, they fired me.
Wow.
Because at that point, they realized I had no knowledge of derivatives, calls, puts, shorts, none of that. And they went, and they called me into the office on the Tuesday and they went, do you have a copy of your Series 7 or your 11, which are, as you know, the licenses for stockbrokers?
Yep.
And it's the English and the American one. And I was in England at the time. And they said, do you have your 7? I went, no, I don't have that. And they went, oh, you probably have the 11 then, don't you? And I went, no, I don't have that either. And there was these two little guys behind the desk. They knew that I was being fired, but as a big ugly guy, they were trying to work out which one of them was going to do it and which the other one was going to run out of the room. As this tension started to mount in the room, one of them just looked at it and we all started laughing. We realized, and during that laughter, one of them went, what did you think would happen? Because it was so obvious. And I went, I took a shot. I just took it, you know? And he went, you know, you're fired, don't you? And I went, yeah, I'm going to do that. And they went, well, here's the thing, fella. Because we brought you over here from the UK, you get your apartment for 3 months and we have to pay you a month's salary.
Beautiful.
And I went, result, you know? And that was it. The downside was I was sharing this apartment with 3 other guys who now looked to me like I was cancer. They looked to me like I was, they didn't look at me as a boy that was trying to kind of like work his way up in life. They looked at me as an outright fraud and liar. So I had to stay out all night, go back to the apartment, sleep during the day when they weren't there, and then go out all night again. So because of that, I had trouble getting a job. I ended up becoming a doorman of a nightclub, which I thought, and this is a funny little thing about all entrepreneurial journeys, I thought I had reached my lowest level. I'm now on the door with a job description to slap people that get out of hand.
Yep.
And as we were discussing earlier, I used to do kickboxing as a young lad, not because I wanted to be the toughest boy in the world, but because I didn't like getting a punch in the head.
You didn't want to get your ass kicked.
I didn't. So I took up kickboxing because I wanted to go into the pub and beat everyone up. But I discovered when you train at martial arts, the more you know how to fight,
the less you fight.
Thank you for finishing it. You're totally right. So I got involved in so few fights, and I would walk up to a guy in a nightclub that I'd been told to kick out, and I'd be like, look, we can dance, or you can leave and come back tomorrow night and we're all good. You know, which one is it going to be? Let me know, you know? And 9 times out of 10, they'd be like, all right, fella. And they would leave. I discovered that working the door actually gave me almost a platform to look at humanity. I got to see how people interacted with each other. Those that were trying to be cool, those that had money, those that, you know, were celebrating a contract. I got to see all of these social dynamics. And it gave me a great education of psychology to start doing closed bars, start doing private parties. And I started working with rich people because I wanted to talk to them. So I would throw a party only invite rich people. So I got to talk to rich people, and that's how it started.
That was the beginning of the whole Bluefish.
Yep.
Now, for some context, man, I can't agree with you more. I couldn't even hold myself back when saying like you fight less, because I've been in martial arts for years, and I remember before I was in martial arts, I'd fight all the time, and I got my ass kicked plenty of times, and I was bullied for years growing up because I didn't know what to do, and later on in life, I picked up Muay Thai, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, and like the more you do those things, you just, number one, I think you start to work on ego, because you know what it's like to get punched in the face or kicked, leg kick or whatever it is. It hurts. So you do a really good job at diffusing situations. There are some people that are hotheads that'll go looking for trouble. But most people, when they pick up martial arts, they gain a healthy respect for self and for others. But they also have the tools to be able to end the problem if they need to. But they find a way usually out of it, which is beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
Now, when you had that experience, when you were doing martial arts as a kid, and you say you were doing kickboxing, did you do any specific discipline or type of kickboxing?
Yeah, so I did Wushu Quan before I got into Muay Thai.
Oh, yeah.
And I was the same. See, if you looked at my school photo, all the kids would go along, and then boom, I would pop up. I was the big kid in school that kind of grew up until about the age of 15 and then didn't grow any further. So if any of the young little shits was trying to earn their stripes, I was the kid being bullied. And as a big guy, they naturally assume he's big, he's tough. No, it's two totally different things.
Yep.
So I was coming home with me shoes nicked or with a punch in the nose or me t-shirt ripped. And my parents would be like, well, can't you look after yourself? No, I don't know how to fight. I just know and I'm wailing around like this. And it was just horrible. So I took up Chinese kickboxing, Wushu Quan, which was very similar to the Muay Thai.
Yep.
Quite simply because it was the period of Bruce Lee. And every time I was in a pub, I would lose not just a few of my fights, every single damn fight. I would go home hurt. And I'd be like, I don't like this. So I took up the kickboxing quite simply to be able to destroy any opponent in front of me. And I remember this day vividly. I was back in the pub, and there was this young guy, and he was a tough little lad in our area. He'd beat me up a handful of times. And I was in this pub, and I hadn't seen him for, I don't know, maybe 10 months, maybe a year, something like that. And I was kickboxing like 5 nights a week.
Nice.
Okay? I was in. It was my release, my religion. I loved it. And I'm in this pub, and it's starting to get a bit rowdy. And he starts walking down the pub. And you know when someone's looking for trouble?
Yeah.
He's had a couple of beers in him. He's now brave. He's looking around for who he can, slap. And he was coming my way. And I thought, here we go. And I got off the stool, okay? Because it's going down now, and I'm not getting slapped anymore. I've only had 10 months. I wasn't Bruce Lee, but I was ready. And there's a difference between wanting to fight and being able to fight.
100%.
And so I got off the stool, and he just looked at me and just gave me a nod and walked past me. And I'm like, well, that was weird. The guy almost gave me a nod of respect and then carried on looking for a victim. I realized at that moment I wasn't a victim. And so I don't think I fought in that pub ever again.
Beautiful.
And I went on to being a black belt, and then I ended up doing a freestyle karate, and I ended up, because it was all freestyle, and then I found the Muay Thais. I started competing, and I never had a fight, even in the bars, even in the clubs that I was working door, never had a fight that I think lasted a couple of slaps.
Yep.
It literally was a case of, okay, pop, pop. And it wouldn't be like a Bruce Lee, you would knock him through the window, but you'd give him a block and a slap. And I love doing the slaps. The slaps are always good. Block that punch and then give them a slap. And they're almost embarrassed. And then it'd be like, all right. And I'm like, oh, that didn't go very far. And so it was funny, as you say, the more you are prepared, and we can take that into business, the more you're prepared, the less you have to worry.
Yes. And the more you're prepared, if something does go down, you can protect yourself with those that you love. And again, I can't tell you, it's been many years outside of sparring or like being in a gym setting, I haven't had to fight. And it happened so much growing up that I wanted to stop it. But the one thing I learned when I got into like technical fighting and actually learning about Muay Thai at first was, and I tell this to people, and some people get it and some people don't, but you never know who you are until you get punched in the face. Once that first punch hits you in the face, you have two options. You can turtle up and hide and try to run and go away, or you can step into the fire and give it back. And I literally learned so much about myself in one punch at that time in my life than I had learned anywhere else. It was incredible.
Do you remember? This is funny. I didn't expect the podcast to be going down. And any entrepreneur listening to this, understand everything that's being said here applies to your business. Okay?
To life.
It's the first time you get sued. It's the first time you get laughed at. It's the first time you get hate mail. It's the first time your business partner steals your intellectual property and runs for the hills with your top clients. Do you remember the first time you got the slap in the head, the punch? Two things. One, the Hollywood sound effect wasn't there. Okay. You know, and the second thing is I didn't get propelled through a window.
Right.
I remember I'm fighting with someone and I got this punch and it hurt. Don't get me wrong. I remember my jaw. In fact, I even touched I remember it was my left side and it was like a boom. And it was like almost like a thud, not a smack, a kazam. And I was like, I'm still standing.
Yep.
Was that it? And I remember my opponent actually looking at me going, fuck, what's he going to do now? You know, because he said, but I remember going, oh, and it was almost like a relief.
Yes.
Anything that happens in your life, 9 times out of 10, the fear of it happening is greater than the actual thing happening. I remember the first time I got sued. I remember the first time that I lost my business. I remember the first time I lost a contract and lost a ton of money. And it's horrible. But that's where all the education was. And every time you get that, and again, we can translate it into fighting, we can translate it into business. That moment of, oh shit, is also the moment of empowerment.
Yes.
And you go, I can handle this. I can conquer this. All right, this hasn't killed me. All right, I'm up now. And I've always loved it. I remember someone once answering me or asking me on a podcast. They said to me, if you could go back in life and, kind of correct a wrong or save your younger self from a mistake, which one would it be? And I said to them, none of them. That's where all my education was. That's where I got my PhD. That's where I got my MBA, my honors, my degrees, was from those dark moments. I would not be sitting here in Los Angeles empowered enough to know that I can conquer and survive for many of those things had the shit not gone down back then.
Brother, I couldn't. You crushed that. That's exactly, everything translates what you said into every area of life, and just showing up and letting the fear be a tailwind versus a headwind. And so,
that's good. I like that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's one of those things where, you just got to face your fears. And most times, and I think Will Smith said this a long time ago, he was on this journey with some of his buddies who were going to go skydiving. And he had this ultimate fear of skydiving. And then the morning of, like, they stayed at a hotel the morning of, he's like, I'm going to back out. I don't want to do it. But somehow or another, they like conned him into getting on the plane. And he's like, I'm not going to jump out and whatever. And then he kind of like keeps eking towards it, where the skydive master or whatever they're called was like, okay, we're going to push you out on 3. But they pushed him out on 2 because they knew at 3, he'd probably try to grab on and hold on to the plane. They threw him out on 2. And he said, as soon as he was pushed off that plane, it was the most unbelievable experience he had in his life. And he was wishing he'd done it sooner. And so he talks about this experience and how your best life is on the other side of fear. Now the guy's doing bungee jumping out of planes. It's like his whole life has changed. And there's this empowerment that comes along with the fear and getting punched in the face and getting sued and losing, in a relationship. You talk about PhD. Like when I was growing up, I had a PhD. It was called Poor, Hungry, Determined. We were poor and hungry and determined to figure shit out or to get knocked down and get back up. And so I love that. I love that part of your story. As far as, as you're building behind the scenes and you're building towards what you do today, what was some of that from leaving the bar world into throwing these massive parties I read about? I think it's maybe your current wife, or it was a girlfriend that was along for the ride. And she kind of saw when you had finally built this thing that was going somewhere. What was that next segue like from the bar to where you're at today?
It was, I know the thing you're talking about, and I'm very bored. I've only had one girlfriend. I met her when she was 16. I was 17, and she's been there all the way through my life, and she's happily in my house now with the kids and dogs.
Beautiful.
But there was this time that we get so engrossed in the fight and the momentum and the traction and the desire that we don't take the time to actually look to see where we are.
Yep.
And the daft thing was, I had one goal when I started throwing the parties and I started satisfying people's access needs and experiences. I had one goal: to build up a Rolodex of affluent people. What I was going to do with it I don't know. But I knew that if I was in a room full of poor people, that was what I was going to be. If I could get myself into a room full of billionaires, that's what I was going to be. So that was my goal. And what I would do was I would throw these events, and I'm dealing with celebrities and events, and I'm traveling around, Geneva and Stade and Monaco. I literally was flying around the world, putting on events or introducing you to Elon Musk, Elton John, Hugh Grant, Elizabeth Hurley in Monaco. I was doing all of these things all over the planet just to be in the universe of rich people. And I said to Claire, once we're there, then what we'll do is we'll transition it into, other things. And I realized very early on that if they don't pay attention. So everything I did, whether it be a party, and I'll talk about that in a second, a party or an experience, I charged. And I was throwing these parties and I was inviting these rich people. And I think it was $200 a ticket to get into my party. Now, $200, it's enough to question, but it's not a lot of money. Okay. And if you're making a little bit of cash, $200 is nothing to you, and you can be in. Okay. So I actually got a visit once from this guy who was with this was in Asia, and they were with the liquor license law. And they went, "You're throwing these private parties around." And I went, "Yeah, I am." And they went, "You need a liquor license." And everyone tries to get you. And I'm like, and this is in Asia. And I'm like, "Well, what do I need a liquor license for? Because you have alcohol being sold at your event." And I went, "Oh, and this is Asia. Usually give them a couple of $100 and they piss off and come back a month later for another couple of $100. And I went, but this guy wasn't having any of that. He's like, "You need to apply for a liquor license. I don't like the way you're doing things." And I went, "All right, what's it going to cost me? How long does it take? A couple of days?" And they went, "No, 6 months to 12 months. Oh, no, I can't wait like a year for a liquor license." And this guy was so proud of himself. He's like, "Well, that's what you get for kind of flaunting the law. You're lucky I don't charge you, You should have just given the drink away." And I went, "Do what?" And he said, "You should have just given it away. It would have been cheaper." I said, "So let me get this right. If I give the alcohol away, I don't need a license." And the guy's like, "Well, no, because you're not selling anything." I went, "Thank you very much. Now, could you please fuck off?" And I literally, from that moment, I moved the access price to get into my parties from $200 to $1,000.
Yep.
And all your food and drink is included.
Cover the cost of the liquor by upcharging the ticket, brother.
What it also did was it took my parties from like 60 to 150 people down to like about 30 to 60. Okay. So they became smaller, which I thought at first was a bad thing, but then they became intimate gatherings.
Yep.
So I'm like, hang on a minute. I'm thinking everything's going wrong, but hey, this is all working out. Because I was charging so much and charging so regular, I turned around to my wife and I said, "Look, and I've got to find a way of turning this into an income." She went, "You do know you've already got a business, don't you?" And I was so focused on building this, I wasn't looking at this.
Yep.
I already had a Rolodex. I was already selling out of events. I'm now being taken on by companies like Tiffany, Piaget, Cartier, Mercedes, Ferrari to do product launches, because I already had the vote. Without realizing it, I'd already created the business. And it was very slow, but it was her. She was the one that saw that.
Beautiful, brother. It's one of those things where you're so kind of have tunnel vision and you're looking, but you don't realize what's happening along the way. And that's part of life, is realizing, understanding, loving, respecting the journey. The goal is great. The thing at the end is great, but it's the process, right? So it was really cool to see that, because now if you think about it, and you know this better than anyone else, you know, super high ultra wealth or super high ultra celebrity, they want intimacy. They want exclusive. So for them, it was even better, because it went from 100 people to 30 people. And like, wow, this is really posh. This is really hip. This is really our jam. This is great. So you went from, you started building this massive ability to number one, give the people what they wanted. But number two, you're building your business. Where did it go from there? And where did the name Bluefish come from? What does that mean?
So we had, when we had the party, I never knew. And funny enough, I have an event at the moment called Speakeasy. You can find it at simspeakeasy.com. That's a shallow plug there. But here's the daft thing. I challenge everyone to do this. What I'm about to go into is what I do for my events now, what I did for my events then, and I challenge you to do it for your events. Okay. I didn't know how many people would come to my parties. So I didn't know how big a venue to get. So I would sell in advance and then find a location that would cater for the amount of people that came. So in the early stages, I'll be like, oh, it's a private event. You'll get to know the location a week before the event, and it's $1,000. And then if I got 50 people that purchase tickets, I'd get a venue that was big enough for like 60 to 70. Okay. If I got 30 people purchase, I'd get a venue for 40 to 45. I do speakeasies now where I max it at 40 people. But what I did then was I used to sell it in advance, then get the venue. Because there was no venue and I didn't know where it was, when I would tell them the location, to add a little bit more of an air of exclusivity, I'd give them a password. Nice. And the password would be always stupid things. And there were 3 passwords that I ended up repetitively using. One of them was you had to get in by naming 2 of the Teletubbies. Okay. Another one was finish this sentence: 1 fish, 2 fish, red fish.
Yep.
So people would turn up and they would just lean in and they'd go, Bluefish, and we'd let them in. And another one, the one that got everyone, was name the lion from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Now, before anyone hurts themselves, the lion was called Aslan. And that was the one that would get people. But people would come up to me. Now, this was, years before we had a smartphone where we could Google the answers on the toilet. They'd come up to me and they'd be like, oh, I don't know. Is it Roger?
Yeah.
And we'd be like, no, it's not fucking Roger. But in you go. We noticed that if people got into the party just by a silly password, it made them smile. If I could make them smile walking through the door, then I removed 99% of my problems inside.
Beautiful.
So we do that today. We run an event called a Speakeasy. We literally, and I dare you to challenge yourself. We literally tell you the city it's in, the date it is, and you can find it. I've given you the link, so I'm not pitching it. We don't even tell people where it's going to be. And we sell out every single one 3 times a year. And then what we do is, once people have purchased a ticket, we contact them and we go, okay, what's your problem? And we find out what that problem is. And then we get people to come to the event that can answer your problem and spit you out more impactful. So this is how I do my events. But I noticed that what I was doing in some of the most basic environments, like being on the door, I could now transcribe and move into my business side. So the concierge kind of took off. It got to a point where I was traveling around the world too much, and there was a lot of celebrity stuff. So there's a lot of ego on the peripheral of that, which I didn't really like. And I got approached at a party one day and they said, hey, would you write a book naming all the rich people that you deal with? And I said, if I did that, I'd be dead before cocktail hour. So no. And then they did a bit of digging on me and they went, hang on a minute. How could a guy that got kicked out of school at the age of 15 be working with the Pope? would you write that book? So Bluefishing, The Art of Making Things Happen came out 3 years ago. And now I coach, I lecture, I train, I speak all over the planet, basically just showing how you doing the most impactful, stupid, simple stuff can actually get you into the room you need to be in. Bottom line of it is, if a thick-headed bricklayer from the UK can be doing it, you're already out of excuses.
Anyone can do it. I love it, brother. One of your ethos kind of core tenets is working with people that you like or that are good people. Is this person an asshole? I guess was one of the checkpoints. If they're not an asshole, we can move forward. And it's funny because we never met until today. And that's literally how I run my business now, because I've been in sales my whole life. And so it was always about chasing. But I've turned my business around to where now my clients and I quasi date before they come into my business, because I don't want a pain in the ass in my business. And I don't want someone that I don't like in my business. And so this was something a mentor I had talk about with me was basically like, the first checkpoint is I want someone that I like in my business, someone that's a good human being. Where did that come from you? Was it just seeing a lot of these assholes and how they operate? Or how did you get to that point where you're like, the first thing for me is I want to like a person?
Well, funny enough, again, it was on the door. I would have someone that had money, but so much attitude and ego that they wouldn't actually quote the password at the door. And so I would turn them away.
Good.
And they would throw a fit. And the following day, I would send them their money back. But if you don't have just a simple humility to just have a smile and a joke, you shouldn't be in it. And I realized very early on that I wanted to focus on the client, not on the checkbook. And by doing that, I removed the problems, because here's the daft thing. If you chase the client because of how much money they can make you, but they're an arsehole, and it's amazing how many people think, well, it'll get better. No, it gets worse. Arseholes do not get better over time.
They get bigger.
So they do get bigger, and they will saturate and zap you. And then you will lose all your energy to deal with the clients you like.
That's right.
So I learned very early on. Again, it's that, control who comes through the front door. You control all the problems inside. Focus on the client and the relationship before focusing on the checkbook and the invoice. And if you can separate those two things, then you are far better at building up your net worth with the people that you have. Plus the fact, if you bring an arsehole into your party, whether it be your business, your client bank, whatever, they become a cancer to all the others. And so I decided early on that if you're a prick, you're out, you're not coming through. I'm only going to focus on people that we like.
It's all about quality of life too, brother. How do you want to live your life? And the last question I have before I jump off with you here is, it's a little bit greedy. It's something that I was working on. So up until Corona hit in the beginning of last year, right around this time last year, and then we kind of had the lockdown happen in March and April here in the US. I had this event planned for about 200 people, and it was called Revolution ATL. And it's interesting because Revolution ATL, there was a revolution here a few months ago with all the rioting and all these different things happening. And so I'm at a point now where I'm getting, people, I had speakers that are lined up and a bunch of people that want to go to this event, but just practicality wise, I don't think it's safe or a good thing. For me personally, I have my own opinions about the whole thing, but to put a room of a couple hundred people together in a room, A, has it affected you and the size of your gatherings? B, have you found a workaround? And C, any advice from me in terms of getting this thing back online where I know there's a lot of need and want to do this event?
So when I started doing the events, I didn't know how many people would turn up.
Yep.
Okay. So I sold my first event was 25 people. Okay. They paid $2,000 to spend 2 days with me and my friends answering their problems. Now we got 25, and then it grew up and it grew up and it grew up and it got to just over 60. And then I noticed that a room full of 60 people, it's hard for the teacher, the instructor, the speaker to now have eye contact and interaction with everyone. You do a Q&A with 60 people in a room, it becomes a nightmare. So we reduced it to 40 people. The good thing about the 40 people is anywhere other than California, we were under the guidelines of a COVID event.
Beautiful.
So we could still do it. Now we've had a lot of people that have gone, hey, Steve, I'm not going out. And I'm like, hey, that's absolutely fantastic. So it has been a bit challenging, but I found other people that are desperate to get out.
Yes.
So we've got our event in San Diego. We got one coming up in Arizona next month. but I've kept them at 40 people max, and I've raised the price. So I've made them far more intimate, far more direct, but I will give you one tidbit for your event. Most people promote the events on who's going to be there.
Correct.
Twist it. Promote the event by asking the people, what is your problem that you need to be solved? And then promote the event on the problems it will solve. Because people want solutions. They don't want to be sold.
I love it. I love it. I will. This will be in my favorite top videos for me to go back and listen to myself. And the masterclass I've gotten from this podcast and just in having people come on and tell me their story and their journey, man, has given so much color to my life. And I'm so thankful for people like you coming on and sharing your journey, sharing your story. One last piece before we jump off. I lied about the last one. This is it right here. If you have X amount of years left in front of you, God's blessed you to live X amount of years from now, what is it that you're still looking to do that you haven't done yet?
Anything that terrifies the shit out of me. If it scares me and arouses me, I'm doing it.
Beautiful, brother. Thank you so much for who you are as a human being. I appreciate your time. He's the amazing, the mighty, the powerful Steve Sims. I'm Jesse T. Be sure to catch us on next week's episode of The Jesse T Show.